Tune Balance is a collaborative platform between dancers and composers. It works by creating visual scores based on the artist's interactions with the code. For this project, I wanted to create a system which could take inputted data from a dancer and a composer and output this as two digital scores. I've created two live generative scores that can interact with each other but also work alone to inspire artists. Originally, I was going to create this project on Max MSP, as I felt this was a coding language I was most comfortable in. But after lessons with Tom Corra, I realised P5 was a much more accessible software to use over the internet. My creative process started by learning how to train a model. I used Google's software, Teachable Machine, to train a model to the sounds of my kalimba. Ideally, I would have wanted to train it on other instruments and sounds, but being stuck at home, I was left with few options. The kalimba turned out to be a great bass model, as quite a few of the musicians I was working with were using pianos, so the notes were almost the same. As for the dance input, I used PoseNet, which is a pre-trained model. I only wanted to track some parts of the body, so I didn't input any of my own poses. For the dance classify code, I chose to let the video and let PoseNet. As you can see here, all the key points are clearly labelled: left shoulder, right wrist. I then created the canvas but chose to hide the video, as I did not want the musician to be able to see themselves if they were using this code alone. Each key point is labelled with a specific number, and each key point is also labelled with a specific code. For example, LSX stands for left shoulder key point X, and LSY stands for left shoulder key point Y. I chose to lerp all of this code as well, to slow it down so it had a smoother transition. I chose to log the console so I knew what key points were being picked up at each point. These lines that are being highlighted here are similar to those of a piano or string chords. For each key point, I decided to form an ellipse, and I decided to add in a line which moves up the screen so the artist can choose which key points are being highlighted by the line at each point. For my sound classifier, you can see here that I had to let the mic in, as I was going to be using volume and I had to get the sound input from the performer. I've used my own teachable model, as it's from Teachable Machine, as you can see here. I had to upload at least 20 samples minimum to the model, and then train the model and use it in my code. As you can see here, the model is picking up background noise as well as all the notes. I created a canvas exactly the same as the other one of 600 by 600. I also created a got results log so it would tell me what results it was getting at a certain point. I then went on to the visuals. I decided to create a box with my visuals. For each label I decided to use an if or else if statement. For each label they have an ellipse or several ellipses which are filled with different colours: blue, white or red. For some of them I used an angle or angle plus 3, and others of them I used volume to determine the size or shape of where they're going. I added the function got_results to tell me if there's any errors in my classification. I also added the function classify audio so that it would be able to tell me which audio is being triggered at what moment. For my sound classification score, I've added a minimum confidence score. When a note is played, it gives me a confidence score between 0 and 1. I added my minimum confidence score originally at 0.8. I changed it to 0.9 as it was picking up too many notes that weren't the true notes that were being played. The next phase was creating visuals for the input I was getting. This to me was going to be the most important aspect, and I needed to make sure this was understandable to the artists. I found myself going down a few rabbit holes with this and overthinking it a lot. I had to take a step back and look at what I really wanted to create. It was here when I sat and thought about scores that stood out to me. The one that always came to mind was Trisha Brown's Locust. I realised the reason this came to mind was the layout of the box had always intrigued me, and I could place my dancer in their own virtual box, sending them visuals of where to move. For the composer's visuals I was a bit lost. I've played a few instruments in my time, but I wouldn't class myself as an expert. This is why I ended up overthinking and trying to recreate written scores over a virtual field. I dug deeper into digital scores for composers, and it just showed me how much I was overdoing it. I needed to simplify it. It didn't need to look like paper sheet music on a screen, which is what I was trying to create. I wanted my piece to be cohesive, so I looked at Ryan Ross Smith's scores and tried to implement them into my work, while still following the style I'd chosen for the dancers' visuals. For both parts, I chose to use dots as a visual stimuli. This is because I'd taken direct inspiration from Ryan Ross's study, number 15B, which involves dots on lines. As you can see here, the composer has a choice to follow one dot and play that dot as it moves across the space, or choose a line and play the note that hits that. The dancer has a choice of following the dots around the space, or using the space as a guide for specific limbs. As you can see here on the left, Georgia is following the code with just her arms, in comparison to the right where she is using her whole body to use within the space. I've got a lot of feedback from dancers throughout, and originally all the dots were white, but it became apparent that colours were far easier to see, and having two colours on could mean that the left hand side of the body and the right hand side of the body could be differentiated. When I first created it, my artist had issues with the speed. It was too fast for them to follow, so for both scenes I had to edit the frame rate down. This has made the visuals a little bit jumpy, but has seemed to cause no problems for the artist creating work. In fact, it's given them inspiration for jerky movements or sound. The main element of my project has been working with artists. It's become evident to me that a lot more artists are curious to work within the digital realm. I feel this lockdown for me has been a huge help with getting artists to actually work with me. Usually the struggle to work around people's daily schedules to create work like this is, but obviously people have more spare time and are willing to take part in general when they're stuck at home. That's why it was so important for me to create something accessible for everyone. I feel more people are willing to get involved and interact with artwork from the comfort of their own home. By working on this project, I have seen a huge shift in the way artists interact with digital artworks and code. I feel my work brings a connection between artists. I have noticed recently a lot of artists are looking for ways to collaborate virtually. My project is a clear example of how I've had to change the way I look at code and think about things due to external factors. Many artists have been stuck alone during lockdown and are seeking ways to communicate with others. Personally, I work best by bouncing ideas off of others, so for artists who work similarly to me, this code provides the initial stimuli for them to work creatively. Throughout creating this project, I've been working with a group of dancers and musicians. Here is a collaboration between 4 of them using my code as a source. It's interesting to see that the dancers are reacting to the music even though when recording this they could not hear the music at all.